What's going on, guys? It's David Piatek.
And Lourdes Fernando.
Today we guys have a special, special edition because we're both doing this together and we're doing a class on or doing a Q&A for first-time sellers. It's something that's on everyone's mind. If you own a property, do you sell your property? If you're going to sell it, what goes into it? How do you maximize profit? What does it look like from a financing perspective? So that's what we're going to cover today. Lourdes wasn't actually too far from the house today doing a closing, so we decided, you know what? Chicago traffic is pretty bad. Why don't we just do it together? So nice to have you. Thanks for coming in. I've been doing more and more in-person meetings, which I think is pretty nice to at least get the information out to people. So tell us a little bit about you and kind of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, so my name is Lourdes Fernando, and I am a local real estate agent in the Chicagoland area. I know this is all over nationwide. I'm also a veteran and served 11 years in the Army National Guard, and I sold 1, 2, 3 homes of mine, and with the PCS and all the moves. So sold 3 homes, and then I have a 4-unit right now.
Yeah, and definitely it's a process if you're on active duty, buying and selling, because a lot of times I think people get discouraged from doing that. And obviously the market right now is a little bit crazy, so we're going to cover all that. And also things change with time, right? So buying a property maybe a couple years ago is going to look very different than it looks today just because rules change. When we're going to cover those things as well, because we want to make sure that it's a holistic approach to this. I'll give you kind of the pros and cons, because right now, Lourdes, how would you say, just holistically, how does inventory look right now?
Oh, it's very different in every area. So definitely talk to your local real estate agent and make sure that they're an expert that are really familiar with the area. It's important for you to know what other homes as far as selling times are. I know here in the Chicagoland area, in certain areas, and this can be different from one place to another, is the days on market. Some areas you don't have enough inventory. Days on market are, a couple days. In other areas, I'm seeing up to like 90 days to 120 days. So definitely understand what the market time is, because that's very important for you to plan out your next move.
Oh, definitely. If you guys can, just please let us know if you can hear us. Our mics, if they're coming in good, just give us a thumbs up or at least shoot a comment on so we know we're good to go. We're kind of testing out a little bit of a different system. All right. And so like Lourdes, you mentioned, it's like really staying informed and how to do that research. So let's go through the first thing, which is going to be the home selling process for military members and really anyone that's involved. And there's a couple of factors that go into it. And I kind of want to break it down step by step. So the first part, at least when I think from my end, right, from the lending side, plus also being a veteran myself that owns a property, if I'm going to sell my property, am I also going to be buying a home? Because that's a very different process than not owning a property and buying one, right? I mean, there's a lot of contingencies that may happen. You have your VA home loan entitlements locked in. So let me break down a couple of things from a lending side and what you should really think of. One thing when someone is thinking about selling, or they might even think, you know what, Lourdes, like I might make more sense to rent my property out, but a lot of people don't want to be landlords, right? So that's why they kind of allude to this piece of, hey, should we, let's sell our property and maybe we need to go to a bigger property. And again, everyone's situation is a little bit different. The nice thing about the VA loan, if you still have entitlement left in the property to do 100% financing, or if you just want to do a down payment for the difference, you can actually offset your departing residence without a lease. So it won't even count against you in most situations, providing there's a couple of factors like getting a CMA from a realtor, make sure it's a strong rental market, but that helps you offset that cost. So it just really comes down to how much entitlement you have. Now, if this is something you're thinking about, I would say what, Lourdes, before you list your house, I would say you want to get pre-approved to buy or pre-qualified to buy another property. At least that gives you a sense of confidence that if you sell your home, you'll be able to then purchase another one. And I only bring that up because we've had situations where life events happen and we can't control them all, right, Lourdes?
Right.
And if you bought a home, you may not be able to be financially ready to purchase another one, especially with the market changes that have happened. especially for the last couple of years. So all of those things are going to be factored in, but never disqualify yourself. It's pretty easy if you guys want to schedule a call with us. There's a description down below, and then we're able to walk you through that on an individual basis so you don't disqualify yourself. But I know, Lourdes, there's a lot more in buying a home than actually the lending piece, right? There's a lot of, it's definitely more emotional. There's a lot of drama that goes with it, but this is what you need to know, because even if, I mean, I could technically say, I don't know if you agree with me on this, Lourdes, but you should be watching this even if you don't own a home, because you need to know what happens next, right? It's like being in the military. You need to know 2 ranks up what they do in the event you have to do it, but it prepares you mentally and it helps you make those decisions. Take it away, please.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I know it's a lot.
Yeah.
Unpacked a lot, but definitely knowing your next strategy, your next plan is critical. I know when we PCS, every time we PCS, we had to sit down and figure out, one, can we purchase? Have we managed our debt through that entire PCS? And are we ready for that next move? Can we, and would we be able to afford this property that we're leaving? And do we have enough entitlement? Do we have dual military? Can we use 2 sets of benefits? I mean, there's so much that goes into it. So I do have a couple clients who every time they PCS, they pick up another property, which is like amazing. So they have rentals all over the place, and that is their retirement plan. Is that something that's going to be good for you? So that's one of the first things, is for you to understand the finances that goes into it and your comfortability. Do you have a team set in place just in case something happens to your rental and you're across the country? So is that a good option for you? And so that's one of the things. And I remember moving here to Illinois. We didn't know that we were going to be coming here. We thought we were going to get extended in Seattle, and we literally had I think like a 2-day, like, oh yeah, that didn't get extended. We gotta go back. So that was completely like terrifying for me. The first thing that we had to do is we had to stage the property. We had to, I thought we had to sell because we didn't understand.
Right.
We didn't understand that we could keep that property as a rental. And this was in Seattle area. And man, we should have kept it. But anyways, don't make me cry.
But that's why I think, Lourdes, I want to point to that. That's one of the big misconceptions that actually happens more often than not, because you have this happen with clients where with all the information that's out there, lenders will say you cannot keep your current VA home loan because they don't realize either one, you still have entitlement left. And this was a crazy part. It wasn't even you reusing your benefits. It was your husband's, right? So the thing is like, yeah, it's ex-husband. So like, those are the things that you kind of have to factor into this, is that if they really don't know what they're doing, you can be without a property. And we just had that happen with somebody that was buying a multifamily. They're like, nope, you have to keep that property. So things to consider.
Yeah. So it's very, like David said, it's very important for you to understand what you can and can't do, and how to be very strategic about it. The next thing that you want to make sure that you have to do is you have to clean, you have to stage, you have to make your property as presentable as possible. Now, one of the things that we did, we threw not everything into the garage, but we would declutter, we would depersonalize, and we would make sure that it is spick and span. And I had 2 dogs, and people walked in like, you have dogs in here? And you couldn't tell because it was that clean. People want to come into a property and just make sure that they don't have to do anything to the property. What is that going to get you? That's going to get you less market time, meaning they're going to go in, they're going to fall in love with the property, make some offers, and you're likely going to get a multiple offer situation. That does depend on what the condition is, how you just depersonalize it, and that feeling when they come in.
Definitely. And that's the thing too, is like, it's funny, like when you're selling a house, that's how it's hard to keep it that clean all the time. You're trying to maximize it. That's what you're doing on that. So yeah, good for that. And I also say thanks to Maurice for joining us. Thank you. Always a pleasure to have you on. And so let me ask you just some of that, like, because all that is factored in, right? So the condition of like your property, you stage it, and staging could mean bringing outside furniture to your property to make it look nicer. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I would even put white sheets. Like, I mean, I would make it,
Oh,
I would put
wow.
a little tray at the end of the table or the bed. I would make it really pop. So I just
Uh,
made it when they walked in, it was something. And most of our properties that we have listed have gone under mark or under contract within 7 days. So all of the ones actually have sold for every single one of the homes
yeah.
that in those three
Yeah.
home sales. Yeah,
It makes a huge difference with
huge.
with that staging piece. Like I used to think like, ah, whatever, why would you spend the extra money until you go to see one? You're like, man, I want to live here because it's the feel of the property on that. So yeah, that definitely makes sense to do that. Um so when it comes to, figuring out a pricing strategy for your property, how does that look for people out there? Like, because they'll be like, oh, I'm on the, this is a famous thing, not famous thing, but this is what people always say. Well, my Zestimate this, or my estimated is this. Is that really my price? And so, how, Lois, walk us through like how does that work when you work with somebody or trying to figure out what the price is or what you should sell your property for?
Yeah. Oh man, I get that all the time. I get the, hey, Zillow told me it's worth this and that. So when appraisers go look at the property, they don't look at the Zillow estimates. They actually look what's sold in your area within the last 6 months. So I even hear like, hey, they purchased this property 10 years ago for $16,000. And now they're trying, it doesn't matter. What matters is what sold in the area in the last 6 months that is very comparable to the
Yeah.
subject property. So it's very important to work with a good real estate agent that can actually show you apples to apples, or that they know how to make the proper adjustments so that they can give you a fair market value for that.
Yeah, and that's a good point on that. So, because sometimes people will say, well, the tax assessment is this, so it's not worth that. Well, that's not how taxes work, right? They work in a very different format. And it depends really where you are in the country, the village that you're in. People do things differently everywhere in that perspective. But that's when if you want to look yourself just to get an idea, right? You can look at any of the popular websites for searching rent real estate for sale. You can also check on the closed box, so you can actually see all the properties that have sold closed in the last 6 months. But that's always kind of like, and it's also subjective, right? An appraisal is subjective. So when they go out there, you're gonna have 5 appraisers, and they can come up with 5 different values. So kind of keep that in mind, like as you're going through that process, because what you think it's listed for may not be what it sells for. And I guess that's another question that I have, because that happened to where I bought my place. Is they under market or they undervalued the property a lot just so they can get a big bidding war? Is that recommended or is that too dangerous?
So it just depends on the market, and a lot of people do that just looking at the best terms, get so many people in here, but it can be very overwhelming, especially if you're currently living in the property. So that can be one strategy, and it works out for some people, but it can go the complete opposite way if it's in certain areas where that's not the market.
Right.
So it just goes back to what the market really is and what is the best strategy for you to, is it in an area that has, low market times? Like I missed one of the comps, and this was years ago. I missed one of the comps for one of the listings, and we did have, I think, like, was it 40 offers on the property, and it went all the way up. I think it went up about $60,000 over that initial, and we didn't go with the highest one because there was no way that was going to appraise. So we had to go somewhere in the middle, and for my seller to understand, like, okay, this is, wow, we see this one, but this one doesn't have the inspection waiver, the appraisal gap. It doesn't have all these additional things. That's not the best offer, because once once the appraiser goes in, it's going to knock it all the way down. So those are some of the things I think we're going to be talking about shortly.
Yeah, no, there's so many factors, especially like I would say that you would need a special class on just how to look at contracts, like especially from a seller side. Like if you listed your property, they're coming in. There's a lot of factors that go into it because I'll say on the flip side, I don't know if you guys out there have run into this, is that a lot of times veterans get discriminated against for using their VA loan because people will say, well, they're 100% financing, they can't possibly afford this property. And that's the exact opposite. So if you're qualified for a product, you're qualified for that product. And there's a lot of things that go into it. And that's what we do on the channel. A ton of education around, how to really maximize your benefits. So you're just kind of really getting the most that you can. Now, when it comes to, let's say you did that first step, right? You got the qualification, you listed the property. Now, Lourdes, like you mentioned a little bit earlier, but maybe if you could dive into it a little bit more, is how does one handle those showings? Like, is there a rhyme or reason to it? Like, have you seen more increase in, like, let's say we're going to do group showings, or an open house? Like, what are you guys seeing more success with?
Yeah, so it definitely depends. So with the whole NAR settlement, things have changed between like open houses and what have you. There is so many things that are different now. The biggest suggestion is making your house available as much as possible. And I understand you're getting these weird, like, I want to see it at 8 a.m. in the morning. You got to take your kids to school. We got this whole thing. So one of the things that we used to do every time we is I would put my in-laws with my dogs into a hotel. And I know this is some people can't do that. And I put it super available for every show. And usually I think it was just a 30-minute notice, typically, so we can get out of there. But that's what we did so that we can have so many people come. The very first week is super critical when it comes to viewing the property, because you're going to get a ton of. So we made sure that there was no distractions. We're not declining any showings whatsoever. And it was clean. Like I think one year I slept on the couch. Because I bought white sheets. I was like, why did I buy white sheets for? I slept on the couch. I was like, oh my God, I know. But it sold, like, and I made sure candles were lit. Like I made it like just a really good, like, and I'm in the business. So I'm like, I want that feeling where my clients go into a house like, this is it. And that's how we were able to get, our home sold very quickly.
Yeah. And I think, Lourdes, there's people on the opposite end we've run into as well, right? Where they list their property, but they're like, oh, I can't show it. And it's like on a Saturday in the morning where, you're going to have the most showings, right? And so, like, you have the opposite. Like, do you really want to sell your property? But you have to be really careful. Like we mentioned earlier, if you're buying and selling, a lot of things need to they need to fall in place. And you really need to hustle and get ahead of all those things to make it as favorable to you as possible. So yeah, good. I appreciate that, Lourdes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next thing we're going to talk about, and again, if you guys have questions, drop them down in the comment section. It's going to be maximizing your home's value. Now, let's talk about a couple of improvement things. I'm going to talk about from a finance side, kind of what that looks like, and then I'm going to ask you some questions, Lourdes, because it is tricky when you're wanting to do improvements to the property. Some may add no value, even though you spend $30,000. Yeah. Okay, so from one side, if you currently own the property, it's your primary residence. Yes, you can get a mortgage on there. You could refinance, cash out. You can get a home equity line of credit, which is something I would probably recommend, just depending on your financial picture, if you need money to be able to pull out to do some work to the property, because it can be small things that change it. Like putting on a fresh coat of paint could be a game changer, right? Expensive items that don't necessarily increase value is going to be like replacing the roof, because that might be a necessary thing that the property needs. Same thing for windows. Unless all the places around you are outdated and your house is updated, okay, that could be a little bit different, right? Mm-hmm. Right. But if all the homes have it and yours doesn't, it's a downside on the property. So, that financial piece is going to be dependent on you. But it may also impact you for your next purchase as well. So kind of keep that in mind. You have to sell your property, you don't. So I'll let Lourdes kind of talk about what those strategies look like. But from a financing side, it's definitely going to be individual.
Yeah. So, really focusing on what brings you the most return. Foundation, roof doesn't really bring you much value, to be honest. What people pay attention to is bathrooms, kitchens, closets, and closet space. So if there's a master bedroom and there's a small closet, people will not buy that property because it has a small closet. So how can you really maximize these things? So when people, you got to take yourself out of there and say like, okay, the next person that's coming in, what are the things that I love about this property? And what are the things I don't really like about it? And focus on the things that you don't really like because somebody else might. So those are the things that you want to keep in contact with. Definitely reach out to your real estate agent, whoever sold you the home, and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this to the kitchen. Is this a good idea? Would I get a good return on investment? And they'll tell you straight up, hold on, let me go look and see what is selling in your area. And I just want to make sure that you're not going to overdo it. There's so many times I just talked to my client. They're like, hey, I'm going to throw $30,000. And I was like, be careful. You're not going to get that back, and I'm listening to what, oh, we're going to do this. I'm like, you're not going to get that back. So be very careful. And I need you to understand that that's not going to come out. Well, at least we're going to be living comfortably. And I'm like, okay, they're going to take a bedroom out and make, a larger living space. And I'm like, that's going to, you're not going to see that in valuation. So those are the things that you need to pay attention to. Also staging curb appeal, which we mentioned. Curb appeal, when people walk up to the house, I can't tell you, there's so many times that clients were like, I don't want to see it, just because of the curb appeal. So that's very important for you to spend the additional, make sure your grass is cut, make sure you put a little bit of mulch, freshen it up a little bit, because that's the first impressions are lasting impressions. And I cannot tell you how many times clients get out their car, get right back in. So that's important. Also, professional pictures. Oh my God, I cannot believe when I see people taking pictures with their phone. Their agents are taking pictures with their phone. And I'm like, what are you doing? And they're sideways, they're up and down. They're not professional pictures. Like, it doesn't showcase your home properly. Like, there's so much that's going on right now. There's virtual tours, there's videos. So one of the things, I do like being on camera now, but before I did it.
I remember those days.
Oh, you remember those days. So now every property is standard. Like, I'm doing a video, I'm getting out of my comfort zone, because it's so important, because that's what's happening right now. And then also, pay attention to what's going on in your area. We had a condo and there was a special assessment coming up, and wow, it was like we're under contract and then we fell out of contract and then the special assessment hit. And I was like, oh boy, so we had to get very creative and to get the property sold. So those are the things that and we don't even know when the special assessment's going to, happen, but the things that you have to pay attention to when selling your property.
No, definitely 100%. And I'll go back to one thing you're talking about, the home improvement. Like, I'm going through a renovation right now, and we were just talking about that. And I'm just like, there's just so much that needs to be done. But that's why you really are looking at the area, right? Like, and the price point of what you buy a property for. Like, so those same people that walked out of that property because it had bad curb appeal, that to me would be the opposite. I'd be like, wait a second, I can get a really good deal on the property and then put not too much money in, and I can get that money back, right? So, but that's the mindset. So when people are like, well, why aren't people making offers, or why, you're getting a price at it or getting a property at a discount? It's because they're not doing these things. But these renovations, I want to harp at it a little bit, because it's just too many times we see people add money in that doesn't come back, or they overbuild for the area. That's why you go on what's listed for sale, see what has sold in the area, and see what amenities they have, the yard size that they have, the construction makeup. Is it brick? Is it do they have hardy siding? What is it that is there, right? And then you're going to see that obviously the better maintained properties, like I see that by me, Lourdes, and they go for $150 to $200 more a square foot. Huge. So on just on 1,000 square feet, you're talking about $200,000 easy difference. So that's why it all makes sense with that. I also give a shout out to Maurice to say he was working with Joseph on Lourdes' team, helped him find and loving the property. So thank you again for all the support. I really appreciate it. Okay. So that's all good stuff on maximizing the value. Now let's talk about some of the VA home loan benefits when it comes to selling and buying. So I'll kind of cover that and what the importance of this piece is. So one thing to know is that if you are selling your property, if you're going to be selling before you buy, meaning the same day, if you sell in the morning and buy in the afternoon, you're good to go. You can use your VA loan and get qualified as if you don't have a VA home loan, but it will be contingent on you selling it, okay? And if you have proceeds that are coming back to you from the sale of your property, you can use that money to do a down payment on a VA loan, which you have to kind of look at what makes sense. For some people, we've come up with different strategies. Some people will just say, hey, I'm making $100,000 on my property. I want to do $100,000 down payment. Great. Other people will be like, well, you know what? I'm making $100,000 for my property, but I have $60,000 worth of credit cards, and I want to put money away for savings, and I want to do some improvements to the property, and I want to do no money down. So you have that option, but it'll be contingent about selling your property if you need your full entitlement. And there's if you check the channel out, you guys will see I did a whole video on that, because it definitely is based on your individual situation, and it's Fannie Mae single family loan limit for the area. So I'm like already starting to confuse people just by saying that. Okay, so that's why I made a whole video just on that with charts and things, so you can see that. But if you're keeping that property, that's also cool, because you can offset your monthly mortgage payment in most cases. So then when you're qualifying for your next property, that property isn't counting against you. So that's one of the big benefits of the VA loan. And then, if you have to do a down payment, you can always get a gift, or some people have cash on hand. So those are things that work in your benefit when it comes to utilizing the VA loan. And on top of that, the VA loan itself does have a VA funding fee. Now, if you have a 10% or higher disability rating, that's going to also impact your qualification, because you don't have to pay for that VA funding fee. Plus, that monthly income does count as income. Now, one thing that I just thought of right now is that if you're a veteran that qualifies for the property tax exemption, it's going to vary based on where you're in the country. So I'm going to use Illinois as an example. This is also a way to incentivize, I guess, people buying a property. But again, this is so different across the country. That's why I'm being very specific on the county. So if you buy in Lake County in Illinois, because I know the county, okay? If you buy a property, and let's say you bought it in 2023, your property tax exempt in 2025, okay? And then if you, let's say, leave that property and go buy another one, that exemption still stays with this property until the following year, and then it kicks off, and then you're going to be able to apply it to your next property. So you got to keep that in mind, because that can be a big factor both for you, because now you have to, again, qualify with property taxes, where now you may not have that. But you do give that to the sellers for another year, just because taxes are paid in arrears. That's the only reason that happens. If you're in an area where taxes are paid current, meaning that in 2024 you're paying 2024 taxes, basically after you sell, taxes will be updated. They have to pay a tax payment, and you take your mortgage and apply it, or you take your exemption and apply it to where you're going. And remember, you can only have one primary residence for the disability exemption if you have it. And if you're going through the home buying process and you haven't filed for disability, and you want to do it, I highly recommend doing it sooner than later, because at least if you can file your intent to file, and it's done before closing, and then it's backdated to that date, then you can call the VA for literally getting a check in the mail for that amount, which you can do whatever you want with. So yes, I think it's a big factor for your home buying journey and how you use your VA home loan. But we always recommend it. But again, you might be in a position where you've used your entire VA loan, you have a sick interest rate on there, and you're making a lot of money in potential rental income, and you can take that money and offset your new payment, which is what a lot of people have been doing, which I'm like, it's kind of like a toss-up. Like, yes, use your VA loan, but at the same time, if you could benefit from it in a different way, why not do that, right? A lot of things that go into it. And then when it comes to simultaneously buying and selling with the property, like I mentioned, if you sell and buy and you need your benefits, you need to sell in the morning and buy in the afternoon. So you kind of get set up for that. And especially if you're PCSing, remember that you're qualifying for the new BAH rate, not the old one. So we've seen that before. People are like, wait a second, I thought I make a lot more money. Like, not where you're going to. It's in the middle of nowhere, buddy. You ain't getting much in BAH. You go from like $4,500 to like $1,200 a month. You're like, how did that happen? Which again, those are all affect your ability to purchase a property. So that's my end on that piece. I don't know if Lourdes, you have anything to add to that before we go to the next thing.
Yeah, well, we got a lot to cover, so we can just go ahead and skip to the next thing.
Yeah. So the next thing is going to be understanding current market trends. Lourdes, I'll let you kind of take that snapshot away.
Yeah. So once again, and I know we briefly talked about that, it is really, really, really critical to understand what is happening in your area, in your specific market. So like I said, you need to understand, these are the key things that you need to understand: the market, what are other properties selling for? Do they look like your property? What kind of improvements have they made to their property? And usually there's, when I sit with sellers, I do say, okay, these are, if you paint, if you fix this and you fix that, this is what you can get for it. As is, this is what you can get for it. And if you do a little bit of renovations, this is what you can get for it. And then I have the seller just say, okay, this is what I want. And that makes it so much easier, because they are the one, the sellers are saying, okay, this is, what I want for my property. And then also having, understanding the market time, that's very important. And then seasonality too.
Right.
I know in certain areas, like, what are the factors? Like, are the interest rates going up? Are they going down? Is there snow?
Is there snow?
Is it hurricane season? Like,
Not yet.
what is going on, like, in the area that's going to affect potentially the sale? When do school starts? I know people move
Right.
because of school districts, and
Yeah.
and you have to time the market perfectly. So that's something that we have to consider. And then also knowing if anything changed with the VA home loan. I think that's critical, because
Yeah.
I remember one year they allowed you to purchase any condo as long as you had a waiver, and that was like,
That's game changing, but
game-changing.
people still don't know this and they still don't believe it.
I know.
It's sad, but there's so much opportunity out there for veterans, especially with that. And it's same thing, like the multifamily, they changed it where you can use rental income if you have 6 months of principal, interest, tax, and insurance.
Some lenders.
Some. Yeah. So you have, well, I guess that's something that we didn't talk about. So in this VA process, I know that thanks to viewers like you out there, we get calls every day from people that might be going through the process. They're like, hey, can you help me? Because like my lender says I can't do a loan, even though they said that they could originally. We get a lot of that. So we help a lot of people out through those situations and actually help them get to the finish line. So that is definitely an option. And that's because we look at the VA handbook, which is kind of, I'm actually going to make a whole video on it here soon, because that's what I always reference. And people always like, well, what is this handbook that you're talking about? But it's basically what is outlined in the how to use the VA home loan. Now, the thing is that with experience, you also need experience, not just reading that, because there's a lot of things that go into it. Trust me, I've been through a lot of pain in my life doing this stuff and helping families to get through it. But that's why some lenders you can get approved with and others you can't. So, but good point on that, Lourdes.
Yeah. And then another thing that I want to hit on is, and then what is the, let's see, what is the difference for military sellers versus just your traditional, as far as like PCSing, like what is the difference? Because I know when we're PCSing, it is a completely different, like, it's a completely different mentality than, just your traditional where, oh, if I don't get an offer that I really like, then I'm gonna stay. There's no rush. So those are two different types. What is the level of motivation that you need to have during this process? Because things will be things are very different when that piece is part of the puzzle. So that is something that you really have to understand. What is your timeline? And it's important for you to say, hey, I'm going to PCS in 3 months, to start early.
Oh yeah.
Start early so that we had a client, she reached out to us, and I think it was like 3 months. And I said, it's a 60-day, like it's a 60-day turnaround time. So we need to make sure that everything is done right. And, we staged a property like the way that we needed to. And we did, we got the contract in time. She was able to PCS to a different state without having any of the issues. And thankfully it went smooth. So that's something. And we did have multiple offers. So the terms were very, very good for her. So it worked out. The next thing is,
we have a question for you,
yep.
Lourdes. So if, because this does come up often, is that if someone's like, well, I'm going to PCS in 3 months, I know for sure I don't want to keep the property. If I list it for sale, can I sell it but still live in the property?
Yeah.
What is that?
So you can, there's a few things. You can get what's called a rent back, and you can say, which is very important for you to understand, because I after all the times that we sold, I never even knew that we could do a rent back until I
Right.
became an agent. I'm like, wait a minute, we could have asked for this, but that can be on the terms. So if you say, I don't have anywhere to go, like it either has to close on this date or a rent back. And what that means is that you're paying the buyer rent to extend the time that you're there. So it is a great option for you, especially if you're buying another property. Because now, guess what? You don't have a home sale contingency, and now your offer is so much stronger. So that is a really good option. And also, it's less stress. Can you imagine having the movers come, having everything ready to go, and the buyer just gets cold feet? Like that happens all the time,
Yeah.
and it's very unfortunate. Or they can't afford the property, or something happens, and your whole, everything is over there. Now you're paying 2 mortgages. Now you can't close on the other property. I mean, there is like so many things. So a rent back, and I'm glad that you brought that up, is a really good solution just to make sure that your next transition is smooth.
Yeah. No, it's definitely it's wild to see what those changes happen. People will buy a place, all of a sudden the other deal falls through, and now what are you doing? But that's why, like, I think when you're going into a home buying process, people need to understand when you're buying a place, are you eventually going to rent it, or are you just going to sell it? Because that's the mentality is too very different. The price points you're looking at is too different. How many people out there are renting $10,000 places? Not many. Okay. But if you get in a position where you're comfortable with it, or you see on the, let's say from a rental perspective, that yes, you can rent your property and make a profit, or guess what? If you sell your place, you can also make a profit. That's just going to determine what you can do with that piece. Now, let's talk about some of the key changes in real estate process that have come up, and I'll kind of lead with it just because there's been a lot of stuff in the veteran space that has happened. Like if you guys are not aware or living under a rock, we're going to help you get to where we're at. All right. And this part's very confusing because we talk about it a lot, and we'll talk with people that watch the channels or that watch the stuff, and they'll be like, hey, I'm still really confused on it. So let me break it down. Not too long ago, the National Association of Realtors and like 5 top real estate brokerages settled a major lawsuit. Basically, what it said, in a nutshell, right? When you used to look on the multiple listing service, like what agents have access to, it would show how much the seller would be offering the buyer's agent a commission. That's just the basic bottom line, right? So what has changed is now both buyers and buyer's agent pre-negotiate what the terms are, and the seller's agent pre-negotiate their terms, right? And it's basically saying, like, if I want your services, I'm going to pay this amount of money. Now you go out into the world, and if those sellers offer it basically to pay the commission, which right now, have you even seen one that offer it?
Not yet.
Not yet. I haven't seen one. I do business across the country. So a lot of people are so scared right now to even get into the market, and especially with the market, adjustments that have been happening within like the 10-year treasury. It's kind of gone a little bit crazy. Hopefully it's going to calm down here in a little bit. That's like one of the biggest factors that people are like, well, I don't have the extra money to pay it. There's strategies within that. Furthermore, the other month, the VA finally came out and said that, yes, veterans are allowed to pay real estate commission fees, and they weren't able to do that before. And that's where, again, just a lot of fear from people. And so lawyers, and again, from my end, guys, I have not seen a single deal where they weren't willing to pay a commission. So I think it's a lot of hype around that. But lawyers, I'll kind of let you kind of talk about, because you're more of an expert in that. Like you see it day to day in transactions from buying and selling.
Yeah, so I really don't see that much either. But what I have seen in certain areas, and this is not in all areas, but in certain areas, I get more response to like open houses than I do showing requests. So it definitely depends, because some areas, like I said, are still very hot and what have you. So the agents do call and they say, hey, are you offering buyers agents compensation? So that's a conversation that we would have to have, and that's just an additional step. But yeah, on the buy side for my clients, we do submit a form, and both buyer and seller sign. So it's very transparent as far as the commission. So I haven't thankfully ran into that issue on either side with my sellers offering buyer agent commission, and on the buy side where we're getting that buyer's agent commission. So I'm not sure if this is going to play out, but for that long. And I think I've only got one text by a buyer saying, "Hey, I'm a unrepresented buyer. I would like to see one of your listings and see if it's a good fit." So I only got one of those so far.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think real estate is somewhat confusing, right? Doing this myself, it's tough because like there's so many factors that go into it. The market is constantly shifting, and you want to be in the know. Like, anybody that does what they do, that's what they focus on, right? You need to really be a subject matter expert. And by the way, not everybody is as good as the other. This is why it's good to interview a couple people, make sure that they know the process inside and out. Now, let's talk about how does someone handle a home inspection and appraisal process. Now, this is from like you are a seller of a property, right? You have a buyer that comes, they do a home inspection, appraisal. How is that handled where they're like, and by the way, full disclosure, when you get a home inspection, everything is wrong with the house. Everything, no matter if you buy a brand new, they'll be like, "Oh, these things are wrong with it," right? So before we go into this, it's a matter of what you are comfortable with in a property, because all properties are going to have something. It's based on how much you're buying the house for and what the area is that you're figuring out, like, do I do some of these repairs or I don't? I'll leave it at that. Lourdes, please.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point. People, every time we walk through properties, we look at the maintenance that you have to do right away within the first 30 days, within the first year, 5 and 10 years. So those are the things that you need to be aware of. Today we had a closing, and then walking in, and then the buyer was very aware, and which made me so happy because Joseph did an amazing job. And she was like, "Yep, that I'm saving up for the old mechanics, the AC and the water heater. Those were the two older things."
Yep.
So she was already putting aside money for these items because during the home inspection, during the walkthroughs, during the everything, she knew that right now it's working, but when it doesn't work,
Right.
that she's going to need to have those funds to fix that. So she was very aware of that, and she's prepared. She's like, "This is where my savings are going to come in," and she's good to go. So I thought that's very important for you to understand those type of things. Definitely. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, there's two parts to that. So one, when a buyer comes in with the home inspection, oftentimes they'll go to sellers and say, "I want all these things fixed." But that's the thing, is that, like I mentioned, every property is going to have something. And that's why when Lourdes mentioned earlier, when you're looking at contracts, they're looking at, are you waiving inspections, right? Because buying a property, and tell me if this is wrong, buying a property as is different than waiving a home inspection, right? Because if you waive a home inspection, what is the difference? Like, is there?
Yeah, big difference. So
Okay.
you waive the home inspection. That means you're not going to physically go out there with a licensed inspector and see everything that's wrong with the property. So when we had those 30, 40 offers, we chose the one that waived the home inspection. Being sold as is. So it's as is, waive the home inspection.
Gotcha.
That's huge. That's worth more than, because typically when the inspector goes through, he sees everything that's wrong with the property, and you freak out, especially a first-time home buyer. "Oh my God, this knob is like broken. Like everything
it's going to cost a fortune." And listen, make sure you go to the home inspection 100%. Take the time off. People will say, "I'm too busy," and I'll tell them, like, I'll promise you, if you go to the home inspection and you didn't like going there, you call and tell me, and I'll pay you for your day. But I'm just saying, like, they're like, "Thank you so much for letting me know," because otherwise I wouldn't have bought the house, because on the inspection, they tell you everything is wrong. But then in person, they'll be like, "This is not a big deal. We just have to report it," right? You see that all the time.
All the time.
It's madness.
Yeah.
I mean, unless something's legit wrong.
And then there's also the appraisal process too.
Yeah.
So the appraisal process with the VA home loan, they do look at all safety issues. So peeling paint, broken windows, making sure that, it's habitable. So they want to make sure that it is habitable. And
habitable is key. It doesn't have to be brand new.
Yeah.
It could be it could have shag carpet. I got a pink bathroom. It's okay. It's okay. It just has to be safe, sound, and sanitary.
And then one of the really good things about the VA home loan, and we've done this with a few of our clients, is say we're in a multiple offer situation,
Yep.
and this is like it comes back, and then we can actually go to the VA and say like, hey, you know, this house was built in 1999 and it came back with peeling paint. Like, can we fight this? And they look at it and they say this is not peeling paint because of the year that the house was built.
Like it's like the lead piece is why they focus on it so much. Yeah, it's a good point. So, you know, a lot of disclaimers, right? Not an attorney, right? But you can do escrow holdbacks on these things, and every situation is different, right? But we've been able to do that, and you can also request the waivers, which people do not realize. So, I mean, there's that one that we did when it came back, like it was a house, it was like 150 years old, multifamily in Chicago. The list was like 30 things. We're like, no way. But the VA was able to waive more than half of them, which is awesome. And then you said do an escrow holdback for the remainder, which typically you have to put up 1.5 times the repair amount. So if the repairs are 10,000, like that was an extreme situation. Normally, I mean, if there is anything, it's like $1,000 to $2,000. And even if you get contractor bids after you close, typically you can just do the work yourself after, and then just call, and the appraiser comes out, clear it, and they send you a check. So, yeah, and then even the place I bought, right? I'm like, there's no way this is gonna pass. It passed with flying colors. I had a buddy of mine buy a place. I'm like, 100%, this is never gonna pass. This is gonna be nothing but problems, and not a single issue came up.
And sometimes when we think like, oh yeah, there's not gonna be an issue, and then all these problems come up, and I'm like, what is going on?
Like that's the craziest part. Like, yeah, sometimes I'm like, man, I see a broken window. This is gonna be coming back, right? And sometimes people are like, yeah, make it come back so the sellers fix it. And then they come back with nothing wrong. And I'm like, what is going on here? And then the other, like I said, we're good. And then they'll find these one small things that just kind of bite them. But again, this is something that you can easily overcome in that process. But that's why if you get the property ready early, right? Like Lourdes was mentioning, it opens up your pool of people, because what you're focused on is how do I maximize the value on my property, so I could then purchase my next property with ease because I maxed out my property. So when you put in a couple thousand fresh paint, you do it yourself, right? You fresh up. No, don't do it yourself. Everyone's time is different, and I don't have that kind of skill set. I just got a pressure washer recently. That's exciting to pressure wash the sidewalk, and that is also by far time consuming. But that's the thing. You have to kind of figure out is the juice worth the squeeze, right? If you're putting in 1,000 but getting a $10,000 return, that is very good. You put in 10, get 1,000 return, very bad, right? So simple numbers on that piece. And then I'll definitely say, Lourdes, do you see a lot of people doing more virtual tours than in-person tours, or is that something like they definitely want to go in person?
It just depends on the situation. I think the last 2 properties that we purchased, I think, was through a phone. So it just depends. The very first home, you don't really know what you're what you're looking for, things like that, and then the excitement, like I want to see it. And there's been times where people are actually deployed and, they're coming back and they have nowhere to come back to. So they start the process over there, and where they're virtually showing. So even more so, like as a seller too, just understand that those are still happening, and where there's out of state people coming in, and they're coming in and their agent is on the phone. I was actually at my one of my listings, and the agent was sitting there, and she's saying and I do the same thing. I say all the bad things that I see, and I'm very expressive when it comes to that. So just be aware that they have the camera and they can be like recording some things, but just make sure that it's show ready and it's good to go, because that does happen, especially like in our world through the military.
I got a question for you on that. Brings up a couple good things with that. So one, when we talked about earlier, depersonalize your property. This is one of the reasons you want to do that.
Yeah.
Because people are going to have video of your property, and have you have your kids, whatever, right? You want to sensitize the area from a military perspective. 2, Lourdes, do you have to give individual permission to a realtor to do a video recording?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely you want to talk to your
Make
agent
sure you
about
do.
that. Yeah, you do.
Mhm.
So you want to just make sure when you're listing a property using an agent, like, hey, make sure like you're giving that they give express authority to do so, just from a safety perspective as well, right? Because someone, not saying they're trying to like to study your house, but all your information's on the open anyways once you list the property. And I guess a question for veterans is that if you list the property and it is sold, can you request that all the pictures be deleted from the showing?
Yes. So you can. The only ones that they do have to keep is the first picture of the outside house. So all the interior pictures, when we put it into our system, it has a little button there to delete the pictures of the inside after it goes.
Oh,
Yeah, so that's an actual option on our end. So yeah, that can be done.
that's awesome. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, because I think there's a lot of people that are always worried, information that's out there
Mhm.
on that. Let's take a look. See if you want to answer that.
Mhm.
All right, so we got a question up here. You should talk about incentivizing all real estate agents to show and sell your home by clearly stating the buyer's agent compensation upfront. So, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so it is now more than ever, especially what has happened with the NAR settlement. So there's a few things that go into that, and if a buyer does not have representation, then of course they can't use any of the forms that we're using. Says, hey, we don't want you to. We're only going to give you your compensation. We don't allow dual agency or anything like that. Then we can't use the forms that are there. We can't have open houses. There's a lot of things that we can't do. So with that is something that we do explain up front what it looks like and the things that we can and can't do.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of things to consider in this in today's market. Kind of as you go through that journey, feel free to reach out. Always happy to help, connect you with the right people for that. But really, the first step is going to be looking at your financial picture, where you stand, where you want to be, and then crafting that plan from there. Because, like Lourdes, in your situation where you're thinking like, oh, we're still staying where we're at, and all of a sudden we gotta move. It's game on, right? Like you gotta hustle to make things happen. So hopefully you're not in that position where it's a little bit more relaxing. But we also aware that life events happen, like people impacted by Helene recently. There's another hurricane coming through to Florida right now. All of those things make an impact in selling and buying and insurance and what do you do to the property. All of that's factored in. So hopefully you guys got some good stuff today. Is there anything else you want to add, Lourdes?
No, I think
I
that
think we're good. But yeah, thanks guys for joining us. If you guys have questions, again, down in the description, you can schedule a call and we'll talk to you guys soon. You guys have a great